Good morning, everyone. My name is Dwayne Schultes. I'm the Managing Director of Vital Transformation, and I'm here today moderating this EBE webinar about maintaining Europe's lead in regenerative medicine. We're going to be investigating new approaches and programs. The objective of today's webinar is to highlight EU and member state efforts to improve the development and adoption of regenerative medicines and advanced therapies across the EMA particularly. As well, we're also going to give an overview of the impact of the current regulatory pathways on startups in Europe. So, and I'm very pleased to be joined by three well-known experts and very congenial folks who are joining us today, both on the phone and here in the offices of EBE. I'm joined in the room with Arnd Hovler. Good afternoon, Arnd. Morning.
Hi. Good morning, everybody.
And Barbara Freischem, the Executive Director of EBE. Hello, Barbara. Did I say that with a German accent correctly? I tried my best.
That's wonderful. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Hello to everyone on the phone.
And Dr. Nick Crabb. Nick, thank you for joining us from the National Institutes of Clinical Excellence. Hello, Nick. How are you?
Hello, very well, and thanks very much for the invitation, and it's good to be here.
It's our pleasure, Nick. So I'm sure we'll have a lot to talk about with the three of you. To get started, I'd like to hand the podium, as it were, the virtual podium, to Arnd Hovler, who's going to walk us through what the EMA is up to. And he'll discuss this for a few minutes, and then we'll also be pressing forward with some presentations from Barbara and Nick, and then we'll discuss how we can take questions from you. We'll be taking questions later, and I'll walk you through that as we move forward. So right now, I pass over to Arnd. Arnd, the table's yours. Thank you.
Yes. So, well, I will speak a little bit about what EU has done on the research to assist the development of ATMPs. And I would like to go just already in the first slide, just that you see. I think it's quite important to mention that we target different points in the complete innovation chain. Of course, the risk level is quite high in discovery phase, and there we have several initiatives, European Research Council with individual grants, but we have also built up certain infrastructures, or in the Innovative Medicine Initiative for iPS cells. We have focused very much on gene transfer and also some basic problems, I would say, or basic questions which are there for stem cell differentiation and proliferation. And then we slowly go up to more preclinical and upscaling manufacturing problems where we have also specific tools or instruments developed in the Horizon 2020 about for the SMEs, which is called the SMEs instrument. I will come back to that in a minute, where we have specific calls launched on cell technology for the SMEs. And then we have actually focused even further on into the clinical pathway, where we really focus on clinical trials. We call that clinical research on regenerative medicine, where actually we have been consecutive in the last 3 years calls where the applicants have to make proof that they have a dialogue already with regulators, and they're going really into clinical research on regenerative medicine. And I will at the end also present you what's still on offer from the Commission's research program. Let me just maybe say something, next slide please, about our current support to HTMP research. What are all the topics? So I told you about stem cells, of course, one of the core of the initiatives. But there are a lot of things still, culture conditions, what are the problem of control, proliferations, and differentiation. We have focused since actually 20 years a lot on gene transfer therapy, nucleic acid delivery. So delivery is still a big problem, and still a lot of fundamental research has to be done. Then regenerative medicine, I think we have focused a lot on cell therapies, but also now trying to get more ingenious understanding what's going on. We have involved also other areas like from biomaterials, and then of course can be, so to say, the clinical trials, can be learned a lot from ongoing clinical trials. And we have tried to always push the SME sector very much in this round. Just to give you a figure, we have roughly, I would say, over 75 projects in this area. We have invested in in the current program already over 100, close to 110 million, and in the former program we have 350 million contributed to ATMP research. So next slide please gives you a little bit what are, so to say, the different fields. You can see there's different application lines. Of course, you might expect that bone cartilage is one of the key issues, but we go also on a wound or muscle, but we also go into liver, kidney, pancreas, heart, and also nerve. Of course, immunotherapy for cancer is quite an important area. We have a lot of projects actually dealing with transplantation, immune modulation, and we have focused, actually some projects focusing very much on different technologies which needs to be developed. I have just mentioned already the delivery aspect, gene transfer, but a lot on also on bioreactors, miniaturization, how we can use different imaging technology and to see the fate of different cells and what they are doing, but also scaling up of what we need to do for media, biomaterials, and so on. So we had a quite open approach, saying that the source of the cell types is quite open. At the moment, of course, the holy grail is the MSCs actually. But we have embryonic stem cells, iPS, and adult stem cells also. So I think all types of cells are allowed. Is actually basically we like to see this competition between the different cell types also, which are quite important for us. Let me come a little bit to some observations we have, because we are funding that actually to, we would like to support the HDMP regulation, and we are a little bit more, I can say, upstream, but I think some observation we have with over the 70 projects we are funding is that over the years that a lot of people thought it's easy, but it's not so easy. So the development is a lot more complex, and it needs a lot more multidisciplinary skills actually than was initially imagined. We think that cooperation is quite important. Actually, multiple clinical sites make the outcomes, the results, quite stronger, and we can get some better messages out of that. And the feedback loop from clinical trials to getting back to the bench is quite important actually to develop second stage products or candidates again. So, and there is, of course, we have noticed over the years there's increasing number of positive trend of potential products with different types of application lines. I think for us it's still biggest problem is the move to the clinic. There are clearly just mentioning the MSCs, there's clearly a lot of gaps in the current knowledge about what MSCs are actually, where they're coming from, what they're doing, and so on. So I think there's still quite a lot need for getting more fundamental research also on that. There's what we have noticed too, although EMA is offering a lot of assistance and help, but also the academic centers, but also still the SMEs, there's still a lot of lack of experience of the regulatory environment or the need for this consultation, and I think that we'd like to stress here there's still a lot of communication to do to alert also academic centers to the different possibilities, not only with EMA but also with national regulatory authorities, which have actually in some countries a special services actually for that. And of course there is still the problem of what is the different business models, what are the best business models for ATMP, and unfortunately we come probably in the discussion on that, this is not straightforward, the business model. So then of course the resources, one is of death, is a problem, therefore we have heavily invested, so to say, from the Commission side in this area, because we think there is a need for public funding in that. Big industries on the sideways still, I think, so I think there's really a need for public funding Now I would like just in the next slide, like to go what is still at stake in the future for support for HTMP research. As I told you, we have focused again the clinical research on regenerative medicine. Deadline is next year in April. So here you have to go into clinical clinical trials. It can be phase 1, phase 2, or phase 3. We have all of them as possible. And then we have specific the SME instrument. They have multiple deadlines still in 16, and they have 4. I think there's still 2 deadlines in 16 and 4 in 17 on all kinds of different set technology aspects for medical applications. So quite large topics, and we think very much that's quite important. Now also to mention IMI will go in the future in advanced therapies more and more, and they have the IMI have a stakeholder forum in September, 28th, 29th of September, and there they will have a specific working group session on what they should do on advanced therapies. And of course, as you might know, they have also a project called Adapt Smart, the coordination action where they try to bring all the stakeholders together to discuss what could be a medicine adaptive pathways for patients, how we can accelerate all this process. So next slide, just maybe some perspective. I think they're still quite complex, the regulatory environment in Europe. I think there maybe needs to be some streamlining necessary on the different regulatory process between the different committees and so on. There are some initiatives I think quite important from EMA Prime, and like I mentioned also IMI, the Adapt Smart, which is quite helping actually to bringing different stakeholders, the communication, the dialogue better into play. There is, of course, I don't want to mention that, but still I have to, there's still some clarification, of course, needed on the hospital exemption.
Well, we would never bring that up today.
Okay, and there is, of course, a lot of things. I'd just like to mention maybe that for the health technology assessment that the Commission, DG Santé is in the lead, but DG Research and Innovation, we will line up on a communication how we can do HTA better in Europe, actually more in a connoted fashion. And so there is something which we can expect that there will be a major initiative from the Commission on that side. Just like maybe I stop here. So
that's fine.
Yeah.
Thank you, Nick. Are you with us, Nick? Can I bring you in? Nick, are you there? We lost Nick.
Oh.
We seem to have lost Nick. I'm very sorry about that. So, Arnd, I want to dwell on this a bit more with you, because you brought up the academic centers and the activities in the member states. How do you see DG Research driving a lot of the technology through to these academic centers in the member states? How are you actually trying to execute that from your position as a funder of research? How do you try and make those connections?
Well, basically we have this open call, so where everybody would know already that years before that the different call topics. There is, of course, the requirements always for cooperative research. You have 3 member states or 3 associated countries involved in that, and that's the minimum requirement. And I think, for instance, also just to mention that we have an open info day next week, the 8th of July, where we have a specific session actually on regenerative medicine and ATMP, where we actually give a little bit lessons to learn for the academic centers, but also for the SMEs, what we had, so to say, as experience gained over the last years about what are the strong points, what you have to think about when you come up with a proposal to the Commission, what the experts, the individual peer review, what they like to see, what they don't like to see so much. Like I said before, it's still a lot of communication to do, or just to alert the scientific community about the necessity to dialogue with the regulatory authorities. There's still a big gap actually between especially maybe with the academic centers, although they think they know, the knowledge is not as strong as we wish so. Let's put it like that.
Yes. So Barbara, from your standpoint of EBE, how do you see EBE's role trying to reach out to these academic centers in the member states? How is that working?
Well, we mostly work through our member companies, which have established contacts with relevant academic centers, but well, it's part of my presentation, which will come a bit later
Sure.
on. We also have a joint conference on advanced therapies with the European Medicines Agency in December. It's going to be the 5th conference this year, where we really try to involve all stakeholders in the development and in the use of advanced therapies, and this is really one of our big opportunities each year to talk to the academic centers and ensure better coordination and a better understanding of regulatory processes, because well, I'm a regulator myself. It's one of the bottlenecks in developing products. If you start out and do some beautiful research, but it doesn't meet regulatory standards, you can just as well start over again, and we want to avoid that.
So unfortunately, we're having some audio issues with Nick. What I would like to do, Barbara, perhaps we go to your presentation. I understand that we've got some people behind the scenes trying to get Nick back. So Barbara, we're going to bring you up. So if you want, okay. Barbara, we'd please, if you wouldn't mind, we can dip into your presentation now, and while we try to get Nick back online. So
great, and you can go straight to the next slide. For those of you on the line who are not quite so certain on what EBE is, we're a specialized group of the European Federation of Pharmaceutical Industries and Association, the EFPIA. So basically, we're an industry association. And our focus is on therapeutic biopharmaceuticals. Even though we're linked to EFPIA, we're different in that our members go much beyond the traditional member companies of EFPIA. We actually have a large number of smaller and medium-sized companies, and currently we're at 57 member companies. Even though we're linked to EFPIA, we're a financially self-sufficient, sustainable organization, and our board of directors really very much engages the smaller companies involved in the development of advanced therapies or personalized medicines, because those two therapeutic areas are really our focus. And a third big working group within EBE focuses on biomanufacturing. So a number of the issues that Arndt just mentioned in his presentation also get a focus from the industry side through our working groups. And we're basically a very active forum for stakeholder engagement, where the emerging knowledge and expertise meets and tries to translate it into both regulatory but also entrepreneurial initiatives. Next slide, please. Mentioned the legislation in the EU for advanced therapies, and I think it's just useful to recap the key points on how the new medical products based on gene, cell, and tissue therapy are regulated in the EU. They are subject to the central marketing authorization procedure, and the approval involves the Committee for Advanced Therapies, and basically that committee contains the foremost experts on advanced therapies in Europe. There is the famous hospital exemption ruling, and I'm quite sure it's going to come up in the discussion again, so I'll not dwell on it now. But it also codifies good manufacturing practices as something that applies to advanced therapies, and it provides a certain amount of incentives for the development of advanced therapies to smaller and medium-sized companies. The aim is to ensure free movement in Europe and facilitate access to such innovative therapies. And I think that's critical because these therapies have the potential to cure disease in a way that perhaps traditional small molecule pharmaceuticals normally don't. On the next slide, please, we can have a look at how Europe compares to the rest of the world. Perhaps this is just well, looking with one eye on what's happening, because it basically gives you the number of companies established around the world, and we're firmly in second place, but we are a long way away from first place. So I think Europe can still do a lot to encourage a viable environment for companies that develop regenerative medicines, or advanced therapies, as we like to call them. What's not on that slide is that we're actually also in the front in a number of other areas. So we have approved cell therapies, we have approved stem cell therapies in Europe, and we have approved gene therapies in Europe. And I think we deal well with getting the innovative products to the patients, and this is what we should ensure, that we stay in the lead there. On the next slide, so how do we address the topics that I've just mentioned? We're active in a number of areas. So we do a bit of thought leadership. It's maybe the newest of EBE's actions. Last year we published a report on Europe's emerging science, and we're currently working on a new report to be published next year. We provide a discussion forum for all stakeholders. I just mentioned the joint annual conference with the European Medicines Agency on advanced therapies, and the next one, please save the date, will take place on 16th of December, and it'll be based in London, close to the EMA. We provide regulatory input through our working group, and I'll dwell a bit on that. It used to be an EBE-only working group on advanced therapies and emerging science, and since last year it's actually now a joint working group with EFPIA. What it tells you is that advanced therapies firmly move into the eye and into the interest of the big pharma companies. So the fact that they've dominated clinical trials for a long time and now are making up about 20% of the pipeline shows you that big pharma is going to focus on that a lot more than they did previously. In this working group, we do the normal regulatory input that any good trade association does. So we comment on EMA guidelines, on Commission guidelines. Currently, the consultation on GMP for advanced therapies is out again and will be a key work focus for us. But we also look at what I'm called the value of death. So we're going to look at the factors that differentiate a successful developer of advanced therapies from those who start out and then never make it to a marketed product, and that will come in the form of a report. But actually, I don't expect results to be available before next year. But anyway, watch the space. We'll get back to you on that. The financial environment is a key aspect of one of our dedicated working group that really looks at innovation and funding models in Europe. Arndt mentioned there's a lot of funding of innovation available in Europe for advanced therapies. There's actually also a lot of money in Europe to support companies as they set up. And what our working group has found and will make available in a position paper after the summer break is really where the funding doesn't match up, and what else do we need to do to ensure that companies can find the money in Europe to establish themselves successfully in Europe and market their products. And the last thing is we also provide active input into IMI and its thinking on advanced therapies. And I hope that this really will help more advanced therapies get to patients. And with that, I think I'm finished with my introduction.
That's great. Thank you very much, Barbara. So from your standpoint that you're seeing at EBE, you're seeing a greater interest in this across all company sizes. It's no longer just an SME play. You're seeing this become much more integral to the overall pipelines of the large and small companies. Is that, how do you manage the challenge of balancing the SME drive for innovation as well as the large company, mainly because they operate at different speeds? How's that working?
I'm thinking about a response. I think it is working because the big companies currently still rely on the SMEs to develop the innovative product. I think they all set up models on how they can gain early contact with the innovating companies, but actually our working groups are already meeting places between big companies and SMEs and provide a forum for exchange on the challenges from both sides.
Okay, that's excellent. Now, Nick, I believe we have you back. Is that correct?
I hope so.
Yes, you're there. That's fantastic. Thank you, Nick.
Great.
So we're going to come to you now, and then for those of you listening, we will be taking questions. If you look, you have a question bar in your panel. You can ask us questions. We'll start taking questions. Quite a few questions have already come in. As soon as Nick's presentation's done, we'll start taking questions from the audience for the remaining 15 minutes or so. So, Nick, thank you very much for coming back. Glad we could have you with us. I'm pulling up your presentation now, and with that, the dais is yours, please.
Great, thank you. Yeah, perfect. Thank you very much. I'm really talking more from a sort of health technology assessment perspective, because sort of that's the sort of type of work sort of NICE does. So hopefully it'll follow on from the other presentations reasonably neatly. So can I have the next slide, please? Yeah, I think perhaps one of the most important things to remember is how exciting developments are in a number of areas. So we've got very strong pipelines of pharma biotech products, and very much including ATMPs, and the potential for transformative treatments that can have really major patient benefits is probably there to a much greater extent than it has been in sort of recent times. So I think the first thing is that there really is a fantastic opportunity, and that sort of patients in healthcare systems need these products. And there are, of course, some sort of challenges, and some of the sort of big challenges, as we see them, are, firstly, the very high costs of some products, and I think a second challenge is trying to achieve timely patient access while the evidence is immature and sort of still emerging, and those challenges sort of feed into a lot of the sort of the work that we're doing. Could I have the next slide, please? Now there's a lot happening in the sort of in various sort of initiatives that are impacting the policy landscape, and a lot of these initiatives are very much focused on the timely patient access to products that are addressing real unmet medical need. So if I just go through very briefly some of the initiatives that are impacting the sort of UK and some at a broader European level. So we have what's known as accelerated access review, and that's a specific initiative mainly focused on England and being run out of the Department of Health and the Office for Life Sciences in England. There's changes to the Cancer Drugs Fund, which again is very much a scheme that applies to England. There's the Early Access to Medicine scheme, which is a UK-wide initiative, and that's sort of run mainly by the MHRA, but there's been a lot of effort from sort of organisations like NICE and also NHS England to try to get processes really aligned so that patients really can benefit from the Early Access to Medicine scheme. At European level, there's the Adaptive Pathways pilots, and we've been very heavily involved in those, and there's a related IMI project, Adapt Smart, where we're playing a key role and leading one of the work packages. And then there's the sort of EMA Prime initiative, again, which is at sort of European level. And I think a lot of these initiatives mean that products are likely to come to NICE and, of course, other HT agencies sooner in their development cycle with less evidence. And I think there are quite significant challenges associated with that. And quite a lot of our sort of agenda these days, not only at NICE, but I know that lots of other sort of agencies across Europe are thinking about these things. It's around managing access to promising new health technologies, and I feel that there's a real challenge to work with partner and stakeholder organisations so that together we can find a way to provide patients with access to promising new medicines while the evidence is still emerging. But of course we need to do this in a financially sustainable way, and you know, I think we cannot sort of ignore the importance of that financially sustainable way, because some of these developments are putting real strains on sort of healthcare systems. So the sort of developments that that are relevant to this are wider use of managed access arrangements so that we can achieve a fair sharing of risk across the different stakeholders. There's probably going to be more sort of post-marketing authorization, real-world evidence collection so that uncertainty reduces with time. There may need to be more of an emphasis on you know, recommended with research type recommendations in decision frameworks. And something that I think is going to be very, very important are sort of innovative pricing and reimbursement models. I think that the actual sort of mechanisms of payment may be very, very important in facilitating timely patient access to therapies that look as if they could be transformational, but where we don't really know that yet due to immaturity of evidence. And I guess you know, so some of that all sounds a little bit theoretical, but in the context of cancer drugs, so you know, we have new arrangements for the Cancer Drugs Fund in England, and you know, those arrangements really, you know, do sort of illustrate the many of these sort of many of these issues, and what we hope will prove to be effective solutions to those issues. Go to the next slide, please. Just a little bit more broadly in the UK, I thought it was worth just sort of picking out some of the sort of initiatives on ATMPs, and I guess perhaps one of the most important of all was the establishment of the Cell and Gene Therapy Catapult in 2012, and that's grown to be an incredibly successful organisation. I think it's really, really supporting growth of cell and gene therapies. Linked to the catapult, there's a major new manufacturing centre currently under construction in Stevenage in the UK, and again we think that's going to be a hugely important part of our sort of infrastructure to support ATMPs. There's been quite a lot of government interest in ATMPs, and there was a House of Lords inquiry into regenerative medicine that reported in 2013. One of the main responses to that was the establishment of a Department of Health Regenerative Medicine Expert Group, and they reported in 2015, and again NICE was heavily involved in that work. And more recently, a further inquiry has been launched by our House of Commons, and I think that in many ways that's really just sort of making sure that the learning from the previous inquiries have you know, really been sort of implemented. And final slide, please. And something I wanted to specifically mention was some work that we did at NICE in collaboration with the University of York, which was really about sort of planning for the expectation that we would need to evaluate more ATMPs, and sort of addressing some of the challenges that these types of products may sort of pose. Now again, I don't really have time in this brief webinar today to go through that in any detail, but I have included details of the reports, and if anybody on the webinar is interested, that there are two reports. There's a very very excellent and detailed technical report that the University of York produced, and in addition to that, there's a very short report, just a literally an 18-page report, capturing some of the sort of key issues, and that was written by NICE, and both of those reports are available from the NICE website using the link that I've included in the presentation.
That's great, Nick. And just so you know, we'll circulate that out after the webinar to the participants, so they can have access to both your presentations and the link. So thank you very much, Nick.
Great, thank you.
Sure. So we've got 10 minutes left, and we've had a few questions come in. There's about a zillion things I'd like to ask, but in the meantime, we do have a couple questions here. If anybody else has any questions, please feel free to chime in. So we have a question from Nina McInnes, and this is, will information from the Open Day next week be available online after the event? Will you be doing a follow-up report, Barbara?
No, I think that question
is that for Arnd? Sorry.
Sorry.
Well, I think the slides which will be presented are, of course, available, but there will be no report produced from this open.
But the findings and
well, basically the slides and so on, that will be.
That'll be public record.
Yeah.
That's great. Again, we have. I suppose we need to address this. Could we ask the speakers what they expect the impact of Brexit will be into regenerative medicine research in the UK versus the EU? I guess, Nick, that probably lays best with you. I'm sure you're thrilled with that. You would want to take a Go ahead.
Yeah,
Nick,
no, I mean, it's a first, yeah, sure. It's a mean question, but I'll do my best. The reality yet is we really don't know. I mean, we at NICE have been very active in a number of IMI projects, and we've also very active members of the UNETA collaboration, and the sort of view so far from sort of partners involved in all of these, including the European Commission, is business as usual. So for now it's business as usual, and we're participating in a number of current IMI projects. And we expect those to continue, and we're playing a full role in the UNETA Joint Action 3 and expect that to continue. I guess where the higher uncertainty is around sort of future IMI calls, and whether or not the UK will be eligible. But I don't really have any insights into that at this stage.
No, I understood. And again, I'd like to remind everyone, if you'd like to ask questions, please come in with the question log. We'll be taking questions for the next 8 or 10 minutes, and we appreciate your input. So we have one more question that's come in here. This is from Abhibna Sharma. When do you expect the Commission to finalize the GMP guidelines for ATMPs?
Oh, that's...
that would be for you, Arnd, yes.
Yeah, so the 20th, I think the deadline for the input is the 26th of September.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
I would say, so I would say fall this year.
Okay, that's great. One of the things that's come up quite a bit, if you hear MAPS, I mean adaptive pathways, has come up quite a few times in the context of our conversation. Nick, from your perspective as well as Arnd and Barbara, as we're getting more and more targeted, there was research released at the BIO conference in San Francisco that now roughly half of all therapies being released in ATMPs predominantly are orphan drugs. So how do we see the adaptive pathways particularly being able to support some of these more targeted therapies, perhaps where we have very limited indications and probably very small effective population sizes of 20 to 30 coming out of a phase 1 or phase 2? How do we practically see an adaptive pathway working to support, since this topic of this is supporting innovation in ATMPs, how do we see those working in consort? Nick, do you want to go first?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first issue, and there was a very, very interesting conference on adaptive pathways as part of the Dutch presidency in April, and I think one of the sort of key messages that came out of it was that sort of adaptive pathways inevitably are sort of quite resource intensive. I mean, really trying to get sort of alignment between sort of regulatory processes and HTA processes and payer processes, trying to get that really aligned, will be sort of quite labor intensive. And I think a strong view that came out of that meeting, which was attended by all sorts of different organisations, lots of national regulators as well as the EMA, lots of different HTA agencies, lots of different payer organisations, and I think the key thing that came out of there was to make sure that these approaches, these adaptive approaches, were really targeted on areas of major unmet need, and if they are targeting major unmet need, then there should be the strong incentive for the different players in the landscape to want to work together and want to join up, so that we can get transformational medicines to patients who need them. And that really struck a chord with me personally, because I do worry that if we consider every sort of product coming through to be special in some way and try to manage them in a very special way, I think there's a real danger of unrealistic resources being required of companies as well as regulators as well as the sort of healthcare system generally. But as long as we really focus on unmet need and products that have from the early evidence genuine hope of meeting that unmet need, then I would hope that would offer enough incentive for the different parts of systems to really want to collaborate and work together to get these products to patients.
Thank you. And Arnd, from your
point, I completely agree what Nick was saying. I think there is we need to have really success stories in this.
Right.
So I think that when we go for some really unmet medical needs, that will be the best stories we can imagine. So I think that will be a gate opener for other things. But we should be limited in a certain way also. And I think, as we all know, this is quite complicated in different member states, HTA, how it's looked at, and so on. So I think from best practices, I think we should learn, and I think it's quite important to get the right example right away from the start. So that would
one of the other things that's coming up is there, in Nick, you've got the Early Access to Medicine scheme in the UK. We've got the new ATMP regulation across Europe-wide. Barbara's members, Tygenix in particular, was the first to use that, and now you're having international competition with the Japanese, the Sakigake accelerated approval. There's increasing international competition to try and drive innovation in these various markets, including breakthrough in the U.S. and FDA. Shouldn't forget that. How do we see Europe and the member states and your companies responding to the fact that this is increasingly a globalized international competitive landscape to develop ATMPs and advanced therapies? Arnd, would you mind going first? I mean, how is the Commission responding to this international competition?
Well, I mean, first of all, of course, in a lot of our cooperative projects, there are also American partners or Canadian partners, even American companies also inside. So, and also, I think when you look now from the regulatory authorities, that EMA has, of course, strong links to FDA or the Japanese regulatory authorities. So I think everybody's on the same line, so to say, but I think the competition is always good. So I think it will help to bring things further. So I think we need to learn from different experience also across the globe, and I think that it could be quite good if other regulatory authorities, let's say the Japanese one, will try this path, and maybe that's a good model.
Share the results. And Barbara, what about your members? What are they saying about the international competition in this space?
Our members thrive on competition. I mean, it's basically the business model of the industry. But when you look at how do the different regulatory regions support accelerated approval of advanced therapies, I think each region goes about it in its own way, and we see good things and bad things in all of the approaches. And as Arnd said, we're trying to
Harmonize?
Well, harmonize if we can, but certainly promote the good aspects of the different approaches. If you look at breakthrough designation and the prime scheme in between the US and the UA, EU and US. So breakthrough designation is available to companies of all sizes. Advanced therapies is a new area also for the big companies in Europe, but the prime scheme early support is actually only available to SMEs. So there are some discrepancies where actually even our big members could use more support at an early stage. International harmonization then also drives me back to the nitty-gritty bit of regulatory topics. If you want to develop cell therapy at a global level, you actually can't really do that
because of the
there are so many divergent testing requirements for the origin of cells and tissues around the world that even within Europe it's very difficult to cope with it. We are working on that. We had proposed this as a work topic to ICH, but we're trying to address and harmonize these regulatory hurdles as we get along to ensure that we can really go to global development of advanced therapies.
Well, let me give the last word here to Nick. We're at the end of time, Nick. So, how has the UK responded to these sort of international barriers or challenges thrown up with breakthrough and Sakigake and all these things? How is the UK and how is NICE doing to try and address these things from a UK perspective?
Sure. Well, I think the UK's put a lot of emphasis behind sort of regenerative medicines in particular. So I think the UK's recognised that as a sort of a strength of our sort of academic and industrial base, and really want to sort of support it. So there's been a lot of work to sort of really try to understand how competitive the sort of environment is in the UK, and obviously things like the sort of cell therapy catapult and the manufacturing centre that I mentioned are sort of key sort of initiatives to support the industry in the UK. I think in terms of sort of regulatory and reimbursement pathways, it's really difficult because you're trying to balance so many sort of issues, and I think in some ways there are huge attractions of the sort of Japanese system if ultimately cell therapies do prove to be the best possible bet of all the sort of products in development, and if that proves to be the case, then they've got a great system. But in other ways, innovation can come in all sorts of different areas and in all sorts of different sort of categories of medicines in all sorts of different sort of disease areas. So in some ways, having a whole regulatory pathway that's special for just one category of medicines, it could be argued that there are some limitations in that approach potentially. So I think it's very, very interesting, and obviously sort of a degree of sort of harmonization over time would be very helpful, but it's very, very tricky, I think, sort of balancing the need for affordable treatments for our full populations, and some of these and some of the sort of incentives that might make things sort of attractive for developers. So I think it's a really, really complicated area, and again, I think it's only by sort of working closely together across stakeholders that we'll find sensible solutions to those things.
Yes, Brexit be damned, as they say. Okay, with that, I'd like to thank you, Nick, very much. Sorry for the trouble we had getting you in, but it worked out in the end. Arndt, thank you very much for walking over a few hundred feet to be with us, a couple of hundred meters. And Barbara, thank you for your hospitality. I'd like to thank all of you on the webinar. We'll be circulating the material afterwards, and with that, we're concluding this webinar. Thank you very much for your participation, everyone. Goodbye.
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 Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, Nick.
Bye. Yeah. So